Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant, and for those of you who don't yet know me, I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007, and I'm the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Now, today I'm very excited to have here with me my guest, Kelly Wallace, who's going to be sharing with us about her unique experience that she had of testifying against her paternal grandfather, her abuser, in court when she was just 8 years old, y'all. Oh my goodness, like already my heart is like soft and tender for this experience that Kelly has lived through. And we know the importance of, testimony and the importance of bringing cases to trial. But we also know that the system, especially back in the day, even still today, is not really set up to be very trauma informed. So I'm really excited to hear about Kelly's experience and what she's learned and the wisdom that she's gained that we can now use as we think about what to do if we're supporting a child in this process today. So Kelly is an adult survivor completing work on a memoir that she hopes to shop around to literary agents and publishes in 2022. So if y'all know anyone, hit me up, let me know, I'll get you connected. I'm so excited that she's writing and sharing her story in this way. She's also owned her own business for over 15 years and is embarking on a side hustle. We got to do it, got to make make it work in real estate. And I'm just so glad she's here because, sharing her story and getting it out there just is something that so matters to her. So I'm very honored that she said yes to coming on Beyond Surviving to share with us today. So Kelly, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm really, really glad to be here today.
Thank you. So I wonder if we could start back at the moment when the abuse that you were experiencing was discovered. How did that happen for you? Did you tell someone? Did somebody just find out, see what was happening? I'd like to kind of understand that part of the process for you, the kind of the discovery moment. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So when I was in second grade, I saw a child sexual awareness video, and it took me about 10 days to process what I had seen in that video. And I went into the kitchen of the apartment that I was living in with my mom, who is a single parent, and my sister. And I walked into the kitchen and told my mom what was happening. It was like a Saturday morning in 1984, in December 1984. Kids Incorporated was playing.
Oh, yes, sorry. I just had a moment. You just took me back up to some place.
Yeah.
So
that was like my favorite Saturday morning show.
Yeah.
But I walked in, told her what was happening, and my mom is really a doer. So she jumped into action.
Wow.
And she said, "I believe you." She validated my story, and she called the police. And it was close to Christmas break, so I think that she was things didn't move as quickly because of that Christmas break that we had, but there was a warrant issued for my grandfather's arrest. My recall of events was like super, super good because the last time that it had happened was just a couple weeks before I saw that video, or even a week before. All of this stuff happened like really close together. So that was the moment when I realized that what was happening between my grandfather and I was not normal. And up until that point, I didn't realize that. And back in 1984, we just didn't have that language about
totally
good touch, bad touch, and all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Our stories align a little bit timeline wise. It was, 1985 when my grandfather started abusing me,
Mm.
and right around 1986, 87-ish when it was found out. And my mom just happened to catch him in a moment of abusing me.
Oh, no.
And yeah, right. And it was her father, right? It was a
Mm.
maternal grandfather in my case.
Mm.
And, similar to your mom, she went into action mode, right? Like, we're getting him out of this house. Though we never went any further than that,
Mm.
as far as pursuing a court case.
Mhm.
And I've never really talked with her about that or why that was or how that was.
Yeah.
But I know she went through the church a little bit, which didn't really lead to many good results, as one can imagine,
Yeah.
happens. So yeah, so we sit in this era, right? This time and space when child sexual abuse prevention, awareness, body safety, body consciousness, these were very, threadbare, resources and conversations. And yet I'm so thankful that there was at least this video. Like, it's almost, I can
Yeah.
almost imagine the teachers like, we can't talk about this, like we don't know how to, facilitate a conversation about this, but we'll put
Right,
out a
right.
video and sit the kids down, have them watch it at the very least, like just trying to do something. And that moment of recognition of hearing your story, being told. Can you take us to that moment just a little bit? Do you remember what it felt like? Was that a relief? Were you wrestling with, do I then tell mom? Did it feel like it was very naturally the next thing? Yeah. What was that like
It
for
just
you?
it felt really natural for me to just walk in and share that with my mom. I
Mhm.
don't, I don't really have a strong recall of the language I used or um it's because it has been so long, my
Sure.
my
Yeah.
my memories of that day are a little fuzzy, but it was just a natural response. And I think when certainly after I told her, I didn't realize that the police would be getting
Right.
involved. I didn't realize that I would be interviewed by detectives, police officers.
Mhm.
Um, my mom was asking me questions to kind of see, because sexual abuse often comes out in chunks when children
Yeah.
disclose. So she was having conversations with me to see, if there were more incidents that happened, because
Mhm.
he was charged with two instances of sexual abuse, and one happened at Thanksgiving, and then another happened around my dad's birthday, October 5th. And so, but my memories go back. We think that it probably started
Yeah.
earlier because I was displaying some super odd behaviors
Okay.
that, just withdrawal. I was a very, very quiet child. And
Mhm.
so there wasn't like an explanation for it. And my mom had been concerned. She had been growing concerned about me. And she finally had some answers when
Right.
I disclosed,
Yeah.
and she started doing her own research about child sexual abuse.
Amazing. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think about what it was about your mom or the relationship or the family culture that had been, kind of created or cultivated that made it easy? I can imagine the parents who are listening right now, like, oh my gosh, like that's what I want. I want my kid, if they're ever hurt, if they're ever in trouble, to just roll in and it's like the most natural thing to just be like, Mom, here's here's what's up.
Right.
Is there anything that you think supported that, facilitated that for you?
I think, um, well, I'll back up a little bit. So I think that it's, so oftentimes sexual abuse is generational.
Yeah.
And so I know that my mom, my mom is from Maine. She's like this hardened Northeasterner. And I know that my great grandmother, I think my grandmother may have told her that she was being molested by a family member, and that great grandmother stepped in and told that family member to knock it off, and he did.
Mm,
So
wow.
I think that my mom was very close with my great grandmother. I think that, just seeing that modeled, even though, it is generational, I think my mom seeing that model, that was really helpful for her in having to, navigate the situation with
Yeah.
me.
And so maybe before even this moment of disclosure, just in your family, there was this general space of like, we're going to talk, we're going to face things, we're going to tackle things. I love that as a beautiful representation of how we often think about how silencing is passed down, right?
Yes.
But even but that can be passed down too. Like we're
Yeah.
going to talk about things, we're going to be open, we're going to address what's going on. So yeah, I'm thinking about your little self who, takes care of herself in such a big way by speaking up. And then, yeah, the shock after that of like, whoa, wait a second, there are all these strangers here talking to me. So let's talk a little bit about that next stage in the journey for you when you started, sitting down with police officers and detectives, and what was that experience like for you? What was the good? What was the bad?
Well, I think, the bad was that it was re-traumatizing for me, because I had to tell the story over and over and over again. And so the the interviews with the detectives, I mean, they were men, they were like, I think they were like maybe 30s, 40s years old. So like having to share that with,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but the good thing was that, because of the circumstances. So my parents had gone through like a very nasty divorce, and there was a lot of stuff going on with the visitation. So all of this was happening at my paternal grandparents' house. My dad was living with him. And my grandpa was drinking like around the clock. And so one of the issues that my mom had to bring up was don't drive with the children
Oh, sure.
in the
Yeah.
car. And so because of that, there was a case worker assigned. And I think because of that and being reported to Children's Services Division, I was plunged into individual and group therapy. So I was talking about it in, all kinds of ways. The therapy was beneficial because,
Mm-hmm.
obviously early intervention, I think that was just so key for me. I was in individual therapy with a woman named Pam Crow, and then I was in group therapy with other little girls like myself who
Mm-hmm.
had been molested by family members. So that was, I
Wow.
think that group was like a 6-month long group. But there was like sand tray therapy. There were all kinds of different
Mm.
modalities of therapy being practiced. So that was the good thing about that experience.
Yeah, that it did become an impetus for you getting some support and being able to get in and talk about your story in safe spaces, and this like counterbalance of being in the detective office, the little room and with these adult men. And yeah, I mean, I think that's such an important thing as we think about how do we reform this process. One, can we make sure that maybe, do you think it would have been easier or better for you if it had been a female detective or female police officers? Do you think that that would have made a difference? Should that be a part of the policy, that it's, there's some alignment of gender when the interviews are happening?
Oh, for sure. I
For
think
sure.
that would have been
Yeah.
beneficial. I mean, the one good thing was I wasn't taken to a police station. The
Oh,
interview
okay, got
was
it.
in the comfort of my home, even though it
Yeah.
wasn't that comfortable. It was
Comfortable. Yeah, I get that.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but there
Yeah.
was, but yes, certainly, yes, and having that start. I mean, there's a campaign, there's a nonprofit that's called Start by Believing, and I think that that approach of really believing children in police settings should really, really, really just be adopted across the board.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an important, part of that process, because this is the first kind of, introduction into the criminal justice system and like what the experience and how it's going to unfold. And is this going to be a safe place, right? Are there going to be people who I feel like I can trust and bond with, and who are really going to be on my side, on my team?
For sure.
Yeah. And so all of this starts to add up to a day in court. And, I'd really love some like insight into what that conversation was like. Was that like mom sitting you down and saying, okay, so here's what's going to happen and here's what we're going to do? How did they like even prepare you or help you understand what was going on?
Well, I kind of knew peripherally that I would be going to court and that I would be testifying. So a trial date was set for April, which was 5 months after I disclosed. And then it was pushed back to July. And then it was pushed to December. So all throughout this entire year, I knew that I was going to have to testify at some point, but I just didn't know when.
Yeah.
And the county where my grandfather was charged, my dad was actually the assistant district attorney in that county. So it's it's an old boy network.
Yeah.
Oregon, a city of 15,000 people. It's cowboys.
Yeah.
And so everyone knew what was going on because it was my dad's dad in charge. And so another thing that was happening, unfortunately, was that my dad chose not to believe me. And there were attempts by him to come to my school to try and, quote, tell his side of things. And basically, we think that he was trying to get me to back down. But because I held so tight to what happened, I knew my truth, and I knew what happened did happen. There really was no stopping me. And so those efforts were just failed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. For me, this is one of the places where I get the most angry about this process, because so many of my clients who have as adults gone through this journey of going through the court system, it's the same thing. And I imagine so many young children are put through this as well. We're going to have a court date. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to have a court date. Or no, we're not. And that is so re-traumatizing. It's so ridiculous. Like that for me is like the number one thing that has to, like, how do we solve that? Because this constant delay tactic, it just prolongs and prolongs. Would you say that? I'm just curious how that part impacted you. Do you think, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that impacted my recall of events, because it was
that too. Yeah, right.
Wrong. And so at the actual trial, everything was hanging on my testimony, basically. And when I testified, I was 7 when I disclosed, but I was 8 when I testified, still so young. And the questions that were asked to me by the prosecutor and even by the defense, like, really tripped me up. Like, I was so stressed out on that witness stand. Like, my mom said I was catatonic, and I had to just take break after break after break. And the only person that was allowed in the courtroom with me was a CASA volunteer, a court-appointed special advocate. Yeah, sure. So
not even your mom.
My mom was not allowed to be in the courtroom.
Oh, F that. What? Oh my gosh, Kelly.
Yeah. So what they did was they had her testify, just answer like 5 really stupid questions, like, what's your name? Where do you live? Where are you employed? And that, when you're called as a witness in a trial, you are not allowed to be in the courtroom. So it was brutal. It was really brutal. And
he was in the room, if I remember.
He was in the room.
He's there, right?
He's there with his 2 high-powered attorneys he had a cowboy hat that he wore. Actually, it's several cowboy hats, but that cowboy hat, because you can't wear a hat in the courtroom, it was like right on the corner of the desk. And I remember that. And yeah, there's, it was just, and my dad was, so there was when I was sitting in the back of the courtroom, I could see there was a door, and there was a window, and my dad was looking at me through that window.
Ooh, the redhead rage is coming. Oh my gosh, that's so effed. Oh my gosh.
So there was just so much going against me.
I'm so
And
sorry.
there were other women. There were two other teenage girls at that, because my grandfather was a volunteer with Future Farmers of America, and oh geez, I'm blanking on it, but 4-H.
4-H, yeah.
So he had access to children, and there were two other women that were friends of my Aunt Mary Ann's that came forward and said he touched us. But then we think that the family, just my dad's family, got to them and they backed down.
Oh God. Okay.
So
Yeah.
there were others. I had another family member come forward. She found me on MySpace in 2008, said that, the same thing happened to her. Unfortunately, she just has not had enough counseling. She has some like mental health issues, unfortunately, that make it too hard for her to be in my life. But I know I'm sure there are tons of others, but no one has come forward.
No one else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that you went through that experience. And then after all of that, the case, he's not found guilty.
Right.
What happened there? Was it just full out dismissed? Was he given a plea? How did that shake out?
He was found not guilty on both of the counts.
Not guilty.
Yeah. And I mean, I was talking about this detail with I'm working with an editor right now on my manuscript. And one of the things that I discovered in doing this last revision and pouring through, I have all these court records, pouring through those court records, I found out that the closing arguments on the prosecutor's side were 10 minutes long, and my grandfather's were an hour and a half.
Wow.
So the attorney who was brought in as a special prosecutor, he may not have been doing his job either. So, so after everything was said and done, my grandfather filed a lawsuit against the state of Oregon, my therapist, the detectives, and the case manager, saying that there was like this miscarriage of justice.
What nerve.
And so there's, the good thing about that is my dad was cross-examined under oath, and I have 75 to 100 pages of his testimony about, his possible involvement. And that case was dismissed because the attorney for the Oregon Department of Justice was like, you don't have anything to, this was carried out just fine. And the is stupid.
Yeah. So when you think back to that moment, are you still glad that you testified despite the parts and the ways in which it was re-traumatizing? Is there anything from that experience that you find to be edifying or glad about?
Well, I mean, I would not wish that experience.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
Adult, child, or teenager. But, I think the one thing that that I did come away with is that, I know the truth, and I can carry that through my life and applying it in all kinds of different situations, in my work, in my relationships, and really honoring my own truth has been possibly one of the benefits of that. But like I said, I wouldn't wish that on my worst
Yeah.
enemy.
Yeah.
It was
Amazing.
re-traumatizing. I mean, so many elements of
Yeah.
the story were re-traumatizing.
Terrible. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want to hear a little bit about, what you think needs to be done such that this process isn't as, traumatizing as has been. And also just to hear about your life today, right? Because one of the things that we know is that healing is possible. And what are you up to, and how have you gone on to live and thrive, and all of that. So we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Are you a parent, guardian, or caregiver who is ready to be informed and empowered and part of a like-minded and supportive community committed to taking practical steps to minimize the risk of abuse for the young ones you care about? If so, then I hope you will go to bit.ly/theempoweredparent and learn all about the live training that I'm doing this coming April in partnership with Toby Stark. We are going to be supporting you in learning how to make child protective measures a part of your everyday, how to recognize the warning signs of possible abuse, practical and simple things you can do to minimize the risk of abuse, how to ask questions of the youth organizations where your children are hanging out, and how to respond to a disclosure, discovery, or suspicion of abuse. This is such a critical subject, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this world with Toby to bring to you this training so we can really bring into full life our vision of a world where adults own their power to eliminate child sexual abuse so children are free from harm, trauma, and shame. We have only 10 spots available. The training is happening on April 16th, so go to bit.ly/theempoweredparent to learn more. Now, back to our show. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Kelly Wallace, who is sharing with us about her journey of healing. And it didn't, this experience of going through the court system didn't lead to some of the results that you were really hoping for. And I can imagine that, as an adult now, thinking about that, you have some ideas about what we should be doing better and differently, in this process. And while we might think about it on a systemic level, I think one thing I'm super curious about is just like, if you're a parent and this is the process that you're about to go through with your child, what can a parent, reasonably do to try to minimize the impact? Because it's going to take some time for our systems to change, right? So I'd like to start there. Just like, what can parents do to support a child through this kind of a process experience?
I mean, I think that just the number one thing is believing, because so many children tell an adult and they're just not believed. I read a statistic a while ago that said that the average child has to tell 7 times before they are believed. So I think that is critical. Having just even one parent believe you is, and I think there's research that says that if a child is believed, that the chances of recovery are just so much greater.
Yeah.
And, I think there is in certain police departments, there is a model being adopted. This Ashland, Oregon police officer developed this reporting program for not only child sexual abuse survivors, but sexual assault survivors in general, to be able to report in a multitude of ways, like having someone else report for them, giving the individual extra time to report rather than having it all be required all at one time.
Okay, sure.
And that model, I think she's no longer a police officer with Ashland Police Department, but she went on and started a nonprofit that specifically resulted in helping police officers and police departments work on reporting. So
Mm. That's really good to hear. Yeah, that those shifts are happening, and there are people out there who get it and are aware that the way we've been doing it is
yeah,
not working. We need to make
right.
those changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you think about, life after this moment of court, okay, well, so that's done. And then, life continues and I imagine continue doing some therapy and just trying to get on with life. And I'm just curious if you could share with us a little bit about, what has most helped you in your healing journey.
I think the thing that has helped me so much is therapy. And I continue with therapy on and off. I've been in therapy for the last like 12 years myself, because as an adult, my experience in therapy is much different than it was as a child.
Mm.
And during COVID, I actually started working with Pam Crow again, who is the therapist that I had as a child.
Yeah,
So
wild. I love that.
yeah,
Aw.
it's really kind of come full circle with that. And
Yeah.
writing about my experience has been very beneficial, like first at a therapeutic level, but more so now as
Mm.
as the memoir has evolved at a literary level. So
Yeah.
writing through that experience, sharing my story with other people, and just hearing feedback that, yeah, your story is really, really messed up.
Mhm.
That really validated my experience and continues to validate my experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I so love that you've reconnected with Miss Crow and she's getting to see you at this stage in
Yeah.
your life. And
Yes.
I think what's really so important about what you've just shared there is that I think a lot of parents hope and wish, like, okay, I'll get my kid in for like a year of therapy and then like we're done. But it is true, like at different developmental stages, that working through the trauma, integrating the trauma, you have ways of accessing it differently as you get older. And
Yes.
so being able to, revisit that, I think that's just so important. I know it can feel daunting to think, oh my gosh, my child is going to, need kind of constant support and, therapy or whatever it might be. But it's important to hold that view, because otherwise we start to
Yeah.
kind of, get short-sighted about it. And then as other, I can remember like there were times in my life where I didn't feel like there was a lot happening, but then I would hit a developmental stage, like when I got to 13 and I started being more interested in sex, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like, whoa, here we are. Like the trauma was really way more present for me in that moment and in that
Yeah.
time of development. And then, at other stages in my life too. So making sure that we just continue to support our children as they grow and for their
Definitely.
processing. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so just moved and inspired by your story. I can't wait till you publish your book. Let me know, because I'm going to share it
I
as the
will.
book of the month for my newsletter, and put that out there. And for those of you who are listening who might like to connect with Kelly, you certainly can do that at kellywallace.org or on Instagram at kellythewriter, on Twitter, kellythewriter1, and all of that will be there in the show notes. So you can go and learn more, and make sure you're staying tuned as well for when Kelly's book comes out and everything else that's going on in her world. Kelly, as we start to wrap up today, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Gosh, I think that the staying really true to yourself is and your story. If you know what happened to you happened, like really just believing in yourself. I mean, that sounds super corny, but I would say if like a lot of survivors have buried memories, like if you have those buried memories, get help, whether it's through like a coach or a therapist. And it's so beneficial. The other thing that I really just like to point out is that I was a child of privilege. Like I'm a white middle-aged lady, and I had a lot of access to resources, and can you continue to have access to resources. And I feel it's so important to acknowledge my
100.
privilege in this world, that a
Yeah.
lot of people have not had that access to healing. So
Yeah, that's another place where we definitely need to do better is making sure that people of color have access, people of different socioeconomic, classes have access. I support that message 100%. And thank you for just naming and reiterating that we don't need a stamped guilty verdict for our story and our experience to be valid and true. Yeah. Wow. Thank you again so much for being here and sharing with us today. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. As always, if you'd like to make a donation in support of the podcast, you can go to bit.ly/Beyond Surviving Podcast donation. All contributions will be applied towards funding scholarships, the running of donation-based and free programs, and making sure, just as we just talked about, that those reaching out for support get what they need. Don't forget to visit rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and to explore the other resources there. And please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a note and then come back next time because we have so much more to share. Until then, take good care of you.